Hello all. Today I'll be dealing with the topic Graham Goode's views on presentism. So before moving on to Graham Goode's views on presentism, let's look at what presentism is. Presentism is basically an attitude towards the past which is dominated by present day attitudes and experiences. So presentism earlier it meant the inclination for reading the past in terms of the present, and the present is considered was considered the end or the point that the past has been attempting to reach. So regarding or considering a presentist, he was interested in the past only if it directly relates to the present, so that it is possible to ascertain what is relevant or suitable and to reject the rest. So presentism is also interested in understanding how a literary text is experienced in the present. So this theoretical approach acknowledges that our experience of the present, be it as a critic or as a reader, as a spectator, or even as a student, it inevitably shapes our experiences of a literary text. So in the prescribed essay, sorry, there is a small spelling mistake. It is not hood, it is good. I'll correct it by sharing the PDF. So in the prescribed essay, Graham Goode tries to address our own concerns, and also in this article, in the same article, he tries to bring out some pitfalls of theory. And regarding presentism, presentism rejects the vision of historicism and the predictions of the future, which are articulated as a rejection of aspects such as teleology in philosophical terms, human destiny in religious terms, and human progress in political terms. So presentism detests any long-term view of human history or destiny. So without any vision of the future, the notion of an overall development, any ideal end or objective, the present becomes only a muddle of short-term activities. So it is seen that theory discards several genuine progressive ideas such as liberalism, humanism, individualism, realism, and science just because they are either attacked or regarded with suspicion and hostility. Now, everything this taken from the essay. So everything is, I quote, a repetition, a rereading, a rewriting, unquote. So theory is devoid of individuality, originality, and it's independent. And the prefix "re" is widely used in academic circles, just as the word "post" is used. So this atmosphere is infusing it is not infusing anything fresh or new, because it is just a repetition or rereading or rewriting. So there is nothing new and fresh in theory, and there is this delay in doing so, which is he says it is a paradoxical result of presentism. So without a narrative that links the present to the future and the past, there cannot be any development but only repetition. And in actual practice, theory encounters problems because something has to determine the theoretically indeterminate, and presentism has to give some direction to the theoretically futureless and pastless present. So instead of pastness, the word postness should be used. This is the notion of Graham Goode. And he proposes three posts that situate theory or that view theory in contemporary times, and they are postmodernism, post-structuralism, and postmodernism. So he says that these words sounds like three characters of Samuel Beckett's play, and these postmodernism, post-structuralism, and post-colonialism, this is how the essay is divided. He is contributing his ideas, his notions on these ideas, and then also on two other concepts which we will be discussing. So he says that in the absence of a concept of history, the present can only be determined by the immediately preceding phase or period, and the period in view or just the recent past or that the present follows. That is, simply if we are studying about postmodernism, it can be studied only while considering or with regard to the period that is just preceding postmodernism. That is, with regard to modernism only we can study postmodernism. Okay, now let's move on to the first section, that is presentism and postmodernism. So in Graham Goode's opinion, postmodernism, just like its basis, that is the preceding age of postmodernism, just as modernism, which is the preceding age of postmodernism, it is a shaky construct. So presentism, postmodernism is a shaky construct as its base postmodernism. So the period between 1910 and 1930 or 1900 and 1940 is designated the modern period in art and literature. But however, the complete realization of its usage is only in the 1970s, and until then only modern literature was prevalent. So modernism in art is post-impressionism. That is a precursor of postmodernism. So modernism is considered as a precursor of postmodernism, which itself was a post-impressionism. And Graham Good says that modernism, like other concepts of the period, requires an emphasis on discontinuities and a neglect of continuities. So he says that writers like James Joyce, D.H. Lawrence and E.M. Forster were earlier thought to be extending realism to exceptional and annoying degrees, and this was exemplified by Henry James in his essay The New World, where he places Joseph Conrad and D.H. Lawrence alongside Arnold Bennett and H.G. Wells in respect of their continuation of the realist tradition. But however, it is actually Virginia Woolf who said that there is discontinuity, and so she established modernist supremacy, and to make them innovative and radical, she placed the Victorian and Edwardians as epistemologically naive and formally conventional. And it was from here that modernism was safely periodized and repositioned when postmodernism ascended. And so postmodernism is, I quote from the text, radical, experimental, skeptical, self-reflexive and allusive in approach. So the work Don Quixote is identified as a novel with postmodern elements. So this was a novel which was written before the period of postmodernism, but he says that this novel has the postmodernist elements. The genre novel has always combined realism and experiment, and Good states that realism is not the naive, conventional, bourgeois form of the theorist's caricature, but an endless experiment in itself, though critics always try to categorize the methods of realism and experiment into different periods. So since presentism sees the present as radically new period, it considers the recent past to be conservative. So both modernism and postmodernism claim to have no foundation and dispense with history as a coherent narrative. So these are his good views on postmodernism. Now let's move on to post-structuralism. So post-structuralism, he says that shares similar weakness as postmodernism, which is excessive dependence on the concept it postulates. So structuralism, that was prominent during the late 1960s and the early 1970s, argued that literature would finally be subjected to a scientific method, which was similar to the structural anthropology of Levi-Strauss. So just as a theorists were claiming this prospect, Derrida came up with the principles of deconstruction. So he discovered that Levi-Strauss' rigorous structuralism and all the other texts were self-contradictory, and as a result, academic endeavors soon retreated from structuralism, because if all the plots were reduced to mathematical equations, nothing much would remain to be done. So deconstruction offers much more material for literary discussions and shows how every text is self-contradictory. Before 1970s, critics discovered the hidden unity of image, theme and plot in literary texts. With the advent of post-structuralism, they went into reverse and located disunity in the same text, including critical text. So this opened the gateway that showed the infinite chain of text, each showing the contradictions of the previous ones. So these are his views on post-structuralism. So this is rather a small section compared to the other two sections. Now moving on to presentism and post-colonialism. Okay. So in post-colonialism, Graham Good points out the contradiction that while the base of primary text is contracting in one area, it is expanding in other. So where there is incredible flourishing of creative writing in countries that were once colonies of the European powers. So unfortunately, these emerging literatures are considered under the third world, so post-colonialism. So according to Graham Good, similar to postmodernism and post-structuralism, post-colonialism is also an inadequate response to literature because its objective is to cover or theorize. So in the anxiety to move beyond thematic and descriptive criticism, post-colonial critics have adopted often uncritically the terminology and concepts of post-structuralism. So this background is not only applied to a handful of canonical Western texts benefited by deconstruction, but also made to work from numerous cultural backgrounds. So thus Graham Good notices a paradoxical situation that they are, while they condemned everything that is European, at the same time they cite or refer everything from Eurocentric theories, that is citing Foucault, Derrida, Barthes, Lacan, etc. So actually Graham Good is trying to show the pitfalls of theory through this essay. Okay. Now moving on to the myth of cultural decline of Britain, which is which I believe is the continuation of the previous portion that is comes under the post-colonialism. So in this section he says that the myth of the cultural decline is also contradictory with the charge of continuing cultural imperialism. So in Graham Good's view, there is more evidence for the reverse hypothesis that Britain is culturally dominated by its former colonies. Apart from the media ownership, this is evidence that the cultural establishment is tremendously open to post-colonial talent, as shown by the powerful roles of a host of writers, critics, publishers and TV presenters from former colonies. So this is more a case of the empire moves in rather than the empire writes back. Also, according to Graham Good, Edward Said's book Culture and Imperialism should actually have been titled European Culture and Imperialism, since it does not mention anything about Russian, Islamic, Chinese or Japanese imperialism except the preface that acknowledges their existence. So the guilt that rather it is just focused on the European West. It is just, this book is just focusing on the West. So that is why Graham Good says that instead of culture and imperialism, the book could have been titled European Culture and Imperialism. So in Graham Good's opinion, the apparent exception to the existing presentism is the so-called new historicism, and according to Graham Good, history is simply a juxtaposed image, a gesture or a cross-reference. And moving on to the final section, it is current intellectual trends and presentism. And in this he says that the current intellectual trends jeopardize the commendable progress made on the basis of the systems of accurate representation, and realism, artistic or scientific individualism are the twin mutually supporting conceptions of the Renaissance that are now questioned, and the period of the dominance of these two ideas the 17th to the 20th century is also disfavored, and this period is blamed for its connection with the rise of European colonialism. The progress that was made towards social equality and prosperity is forgotten. So in Graham Goode's opinion, he says that the New Agers and the deep ecologists see the period as a spiritual disaster, reiterating the desacralization of the world and the exploitation of the natural resources, while forgetting the contribution of Reformation to initiate individualistic forms of spirituality and the revival of respect for nature by Romanticism, which led to the protection of areas of natural beauty. So these are his concepts on, or his views on presentism, which he is trying to convey through this essay. So thus through this essay, he says that presentism sees the human situation helpless, powerless and directionless, completely subjected to ideological control. So the result is that a kind of resignation or defeatism where culture plays the role of faith, and literary and cultural studies need Graham Wood says that literary studies and cultural studies would be in need of more balanced and progressive outlook than passively accepting the situation. So he is trying to convey all these notions with the help of this theory called presentism. So that's it. Thank you.